This is today's Action Man, ready to take up any position at your command. Now he's a sharpshooter whose head moves back to look right down the sights. Eagle eyes alert for danger, hands gripping tightly. He's a paratrooper, an Arctic soldier, infantry officer, or frogman. Action Man is who you want him to be. Who will he be tomorrow? Only you know. You and Action Man.
Danger. The evil Captain Zargon has captured an Action Man Space Ranger. But help is on the way. Space Captain to the rescue in the multi-role Space Speeder, which quickly converts into a two-seater space jet. Saved, thanks to the Space Rangers of Action Man.
Action Man was first introduced to the toy shops of Britain by Palitoy in 1966, following a battle with the mighty Line Brothers for the production rights being offered by Hasbro in the USA. Palitoy manufactured Action Man for 18 years. Dating back to 1919, Leicestershire-based Palitoy already had a long and successful history in the British toy-making industry, before Action Man came along. Its first creations were made by Celluloid, hence the company's original name of Castaloid Limited. Despite the slow development of the plastic moulding process here in Britain, Castaloid, led by its founder Alfred Edward Pallett, was able to establish itself and gain foothold in the market by selling cheap toys, kitchen gadgets and fancy goods primarily to the Woolworths chain. Its first doll was then produced in 1925. Disaster struck in 1927, however, when a tragic fire not only destroyed the whole operation but also killed an employee. Pallett bounced back and refused to give in, eventually opening a new factory in Leicester, which expanded rapidly during the late 1920s. And in 1931, Castaloid Limited became a subsidiary of British Xylanide, who had previously pioneered the use of injection moulding machines in Britain. 6 years later, further expansion saw Castaloid develop a new factory in Colville, Leicestershire, where it began making its heads for soft-bodied dolls under a new subsidiary brand called Palitoy Playthings. Injection moulding was introduced to Colville in 1941, and despite disruption to the toy production during the World War II, Castaloid Limited enjoyed great success in the post-war years, making all manner of toys and games. It was around this time that Castaloid Limited took up the sole trading name of Palitoy. Growth continued through the 1950s and 60s, and greater things were to follow after the successful acquisition of the license to produce and market Hasbro's G.I. Joe in the UK under the name of Action Man in 1966. Interestingly, Palitoy had previously made a male figure with removable limbs in the 1950s in the form of ventriloquist doll based on the popular radio and TV character Archie Andrews. But these figures were much different. G.I. Joe was a fighting figure with a gun. Male dolls for boys was a completely new concept in the mid-1960s. The idea of a boy's doll seemed so odd to T. Eric Smith, then owner of Rosebud Dolls, that he flatly refused to get involved in the bidding, and in so doing probably turned down the opportunity of making himself a small fortune. He reasoned boys will not play with dolls. In February 1964, Hasbro successfully launched and patented G.I. Joe in the USA and looked to expand its distribution throughout the rest of the world. Hasbro always avoided the use of the word doll to describe G.I. Joe and based its first figures on American servicemen. Early prototypes were given individual names Rocky, Skip and Ace before Hasbro finally settled on G.I. Joe. One of the original prototypes has since been sold at auction for $200,000, a measure of how the market for vintage figures has exploded in recent times. It is believed that Hal Benton, Palitoy's sales director, had discovered the early G.I. Joe figures whilst on a trip to the United States, sometime around 1964. purchasing one for his grandson. The boy loved the action soldier and got great play value from it, prompting Benton to take it to show Palitoy's general manager, Miles Fletcher. Despite a few doubts as to whether it would be well received here in the UK, Palitoy decided to give it a go. Following its agreement with Hasbro, the first 3 Action Man figures appeared as Action Soldier, Action Sailor, and Action Pilot, each based on servicemen of the American Armed Forces. There were 4 original hair colours to choose from: blonde, auburn, brown and black. Hair on the early figures was moulded onto the head and painted on, with the later flocking process being developed by Palitoy. The scar on the right cheek of the figures was a closely guarded copyrighted feature of both Action Man and G.I. Joe. The first Action Man figures were marked on the lower back, made in England by Palitoy under the licence from Hasbro, and came with a thin stamped steel dog tag. From 1970 onwards, the tags were made of grey or green plastic, with bullet holes passing through the logo. Between 1977 and 1984, figures were marked GPG Products Corp 1978. Almost from the start of the production, Action Man had a rival to contend with in the shape of Tommy Gunn. As previously mentioned, Lion Brothers lost out to Palitoy in negotiating a deal with Hasbro, so it decided to launch its own fighting figure in 1966. It was produced out of the Pedigree toy stable. Unlike Action Man, Tommy Gunn is based on a British infantry soldier, suitably armed with a toy Sterling submachine gun. Tommy figures were extremely well made and had great detail, including real laces on their boots. Pedigree, however, were not able to produce such a wide range of accessories as Palitoy were capable of in partnership with Hasbro. The demise of Tommy Gunn in 1968 provided Palitoy with an ideal opportunity to switch the focus of its own figures to represent fighting soldiers of the British Armed Forces, rather than those of the USA. Pedigree did not completely abandon its interest in action figures, however. It cleverly converted them into figures of Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, an attempt to cash in on the new demand for television-related toys. Needless to say, these figures were highly prized by toy collectors today. In 1968, just 2 years after the launch of Action Man, Palitoy was sold to General Mills Inc. of the USA. The 1970s became the halcyon days for Action Man, with all manner of interesting figures and innovations launched, following the introduction of the classic Eagle Eye figure in 1976. By the early 1980s, however, General Mills had acquired a large portfolio of companies under its wing, including Denny Fisher, Chad Valley and Airfix. But the British toy industry had suddenly begun to slump. Despite the introduction of innovative new figures like Captain Zargon, the Space Pirate, and Rom the Robot, the writing was on the wall. 1984 saw the end of all GM's European production, including Action Man, and the Coeville factory was finally closed in 1986, resulting in mass redundancies. It was the end of the great British toy, a toy that now attracts a massive following of collectors eager to lay their hands on those elusive, rare early figures and accessories. Car boat sales can be a great hunting ground for Action Man, and there are many weird and wonderful accessories. And the price of some of the rarer bits can be quite astounding. How I wish I had my 1970 Centaur Commander. Sadly, it's gone the way of the rest of the Action Man in the landfill, never to be seen again. And replacing it now would no doubt cost a small fortune.